The big ticket Kevin Garnett recently announced his retirement from the NBA. I am a Celtics fan, so I remember a lot of great moments from Kevin Garnett. He also gave me one of my most popular tweets ever, so that's cool, I guess. I know KG follows me on Twitter too, so I know he appreciated that one. He did also deliver my Celtics a championship. That's pretty good too. And he was also one of the best players in the league for about 10 years with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Even though he never had the best talent around him, he had Sam Cassell, who was an offensive point guard, if anything. He had inefficient Latrell Sprewell. He had Wally Szczerbiak as a shooter. Never really had another star player next to him, and he still made it to the Western Conference Finals, won an MVP. KG is a beast, and the question is he the second best power forward ever? Of course, Tim Duncan's number one. 5 championships and being great on both sides of the floor will make you number one all time at your position. But is KG number 2? If I'm looking at the guys he's competing with, he's going up against, in my opinion, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and Dirk. All the respect in the world to Bob Pettit and Kevin McHale, but I don't think they crack the top 5. I think if we start comparing these guys, I think there's a real discussion to be made about KG being number 2 all time. If we compare him to Karl Malone, first off, Karl Malone, the second best scorer in NBA history, a beast when it comes to pick and rolls, pick and pops, strong as all hell on the block. And then if he gets into the paint, you have to pretty much deal with he's going to either get fouled or he's going to score or he's going to do both. He's the mailman, he's a beast. That being said, I feel like there were a lot of questions about Karl Malone's mental toughness. There are more than a few occasions of missed free throws in big opportunities. There is Michael Jordan stealing the ball from you in a late game possession before he hit the shot. And you can do a quick Google search and you can find instances of Karl Malone's just overall leadership being questioned. Kevin Garnett's leadership was never questioned. When we're talking about the intensity, the energy, and the straight up craziness of Kevin Garnett and his ability to uplift his teammates and probably scare them a little bit too, if we can be honest. He made sure guys were ready to play. If I have to pick one of these guys, KG or Karl Malone, to be the voice of the locker room, to be the guy to make sure everybody's in check, and also to be the guy who, in the late game huddle, just make sure everybody's good, make sure everybody's ready, I'm taking Kevin Garnett over Karl Malone. But also, when we look at defense, I think Karl Malone, he was a damn good defender around the rim, post defender, things like that, but he couldn't step out on the perimeter like Kevin Garnett. KG very well may be the best defensive power forward ever. I think Tim Duncan as well as Dennis Rodman are right there with him. But Kevin Garnett's ability to defend the pick and roll, play help defense, if he gets switched onto a perimeter player, it's fine. This is mainly his Minnesota days. KG is one of the best all-around defensive players ever. And if you ask Karl Malone to step out onto the perimeter, or if he ends up switched, or if he really is asked to move around a lot and help defense, I think he just doesn't match up to Kevin Garnett. Now, all this being said, Karl Malone's ability to score on the low block was definitely better than KG's, and that one area right there might be enough to put him over. Now, one insane thing about Malone was his longevity, because he was one of the top players in the league for about 16 years. That's pretty damn ridiculous. And if you were going to use that as a way to put him above Kevin Garnett, I would definitely understand, but I think there are some things KG's better at, and there's some things Karl Malone's better at, but I feel like I'm still leaning towards KG for the defense and the intensity. Now, when we're talking about Charles Barkley, the mental toughness is not a question at all, and he, like KG, a little crazy, but the type of guy that I would definitely want leading my team. Someone who is, again, going to make sure everybody's in line, make sure they're good, make sure they're ready for a big game, scare them a little bit, never a bad thing. And also, I think Barkley, pretty much unstoppable on the low block. Also one of the best rebounders in the history of the NBA. So I think in terms of low post scoring as well as rebounding, I think he and KG are kind of neck and neck. Also playmaking. Chuck averaged about 4 assists plus for more than a few seasons. But defensively, Kevin Garnett is in another class than Barkley. Because Chuck, he had the height issues, and that made it kind of tough for him to really be a defensive player like that. And he wasn't awful. But again, Kevin Garnett is one of the best defensive players of all time, and I think that is a definite case that you could make for him over Charles Barkley. And I think it should also be mentioned that, Karl Malone and Chuck are great, and they're definitely 2 of the best players ever. When we look at the teammates that Charles Barkley had around him in Phoenix, I think KG would have killed to have a team that talented around him with, there's Kevin Johnson, who averaged over 20 points a game a decent amount of times before Chuck actually got there. Dan Marley as well. And then with Karl Malone, of course, he did have John Stockton next to him. Again, Chuck and Malone are great, but it would have been nice to see KG with one genuine other star player for an extended period of time. Now if we compare KG to Dirk, the 2011 finals run by Dirk Nowitzki, it's incredible. Okay, it's really his performance. Dallas's performance overall was great. His performance was fantastic. But I think similar to Charles Barkley, I think Dirk's defense compared to KG's is so drastic. I feel like I would still take Kevin Garnett over Dirk. Of course, Nowitzki, when it comes to the low post scoring, there was a stretch of time where he was basically unstoppable on the low block. But Dirk's the turnaround jumpers and the ability to also hit from outside, which will really confuse a lot of teams, especially in the mid-2000s. Super valuable. But defensively, I think Garnett, again, he's one of the best defensive players ever. I feel like the only power forwards who really compete with him on that side of the floor are Dennis Rodman and Tim Duncan. Me personally, I'm a huge fan of defense, so that there really could put Garnett to number 2 all time for me. That, and of course, if he would have had some better teammates in Minnesota, he could have won a championship or 2 there. So I could definitely see why you would list these 4 guys in any order you would want after Tim Duncan. Because Malone, unstoppable on the low block, one of the best players in the league for 16 plus years, which is ridiculous. Also a pretty damn solid defensive player, not KG level, but still pretty good. Probably the best pick and roll player ever as well. Then you look at Charles Barkley, also unstoppable on the low block. They had to make a rule just to stop the guy, the 5 seconds back to the basket. It's basically the Charles Barkley rule. And he was also probably the second best player in the league for a while, next to Michael Jordan. He really was that good, Chuck. And of course his ability to go up and down the floor with the ball in his hand. He was pretty damn athletic for his position. And then for Dirk, the 2011 finals run is crazy good, and his ability to score on the low block, but me personally, I think I'm leaning towards KG for second best all time, because the intensity, the mental toughness, the leadership, the ability to score on the low post, his playmaking where he averaged 5 assists a game for a long time, combined with being one of the best defensive players of all time, and carrying a not super awesome Minnesota team to some decent playoff success and winning an MVP. And then we saw what he did in Boston. But again, if you believe Karl Malone is better, if you believe Charles Barkley is better, I've seen some people say Dirk is better. I can't really argue with you too much. So that's going to do it. Shout out to Kevin Garnett, and I'm done.